Good morning, everybody. I am so glad to be here with you, and wow, sixth graders. I think you're probably going to be one of my toughest crowds. What do you think? I want you to be gentle on me. I could tell you all about my educational career. I could even tell you about speaking at the White House and some of the amazing people that I've met. But I decided to go back to when I was a sixth grader and tell you about some of the lessons that I learned. Does that sound all right? You know, one of the biggest things about me and about anyone who has had any level of success is their ability to build relationships. And so when I thought about the topics that I was given to consider to speak with you about today, I thought about relationships. So I want to take you back into my sixth grade year in a school called Mira Vista Elementary School in the city of El Cerrito, California. It was a school very much like this, lots of diversity, lots of beautiful young people, and lots of amazing staff members who cared about each one of us. I remember the summer of my fifth grade year. During the summer of my fifth grade year, I had a lot of anxiety. I was really, really worried. There was a reason for that worry. You know, just before the summer of my fifth grade year, I found out that I was going to have a teacher named Mrs. Demertz. Now, Mrs. Demertz was the meanest teacher in the school, according to all of the students. And so all summer long, I thought, oh, no. Mrs. Demertz, my sixth grade year is going to be a wash. Actually, I had never spoken with Mrs. Demertz. I'd only seen her in the hallway. And I remember her horn-rimmed glasses, and she wore one of those beehive hairdos. And she always had a very serious look on her face. I also remember the click, click, click of her heels in the hallway. I know that I actually loved school. I loved school a lot. I actually had decided in third grade that I wanted to be a teacher. And I figured perhaps that Mrs. Demertz might crush that dream. The first day was like any other day. Mrs. Demertz had those activities, you know the ones, the warm-up activities. Everybody gets to know each other. We go outside for a game of kickball, and it's all very exciting. I started to think maybe I had second-guessed or not been quite clear about who Mrs. Demertz really was. One day, my mom was going to be late picking me up. My mom worked in San Francisco. If you know anything about El Cerrito to San Francisco, that's a very, very long drive. So I had to stay with Mrs. Demertz for half an hour after school. Oh, God. I had to stay with Mrs. Demertz by myself for half an hour after school. Actually, as I thought about it, during those first few days, it hadn't been too bad with her. So maybe my anxiety could be cured by my curiosity. Maybe I could find out a little bit more about her by spending some time with her after school. I remember her asking me to sharpen the pencils, to put them in the pencil jar. I remember her asking me to stack the homework. I remember her asking me to organize all the different sections in the back. And when I finished, I actually sat down to complete my homework. Mrs. Demertz came and sat down right next to me. In fact, she sat so close that I could smell her Estee Lauder perfume. I thought, oh no, this is really not going to end well. The interesting part is that she actually started asking me about my family, asking me about my friends, asking me about my hobbies, and then she said something interesting. She said, "Before I ever met you, Ramona," my name is Ramona, yes, Ramona the pest. "Before I ever met you," she said, "I actually found out from your 5th grade teacher that you were very bright and that you wanted to be a teacher and that you could be a tremendous help to me in my class." I felt horrible. I had made all of these stories up in my mind about who Mrs. DeMertz was. I had heard that she was mean. I believed all of those young people without ever giving her a chance. I found out then, actually, that curiosity can cure your anxiety. And I remembered a lesson that my mother had taught me. Maybe your mom teaches you that same lesson. The lesson is, give everyone an A until they earn an F. Again, the lesson is, give everyone an A until they earn an F. Once I had finished kind of sharing with Mrs. DeMertz who I was, she had an opportunity to share with me who she was. Actually, Mrs. DeMertz had decided that she was going to be a teacher about at the same age that I decided, which was 3rd grade. Mrs. DeMertz actually was the daughter of immigrants who took education very seriously. Mrs. DeMertz actually was one who believed in all of her students. So I figured that what had happened was that students were afraid of her because she held very high expectations for all of us. She expected all of us to complete our homework. She expected all of us to do all of the mathematic problems. She expected all of us to be successful professionals at the end of the day. I was reminded of another lesson that my parents had taught me, and that lesson is, give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Many years later, after I had graduated from UC Berkeley and enrolled in a teacher education program at the University of San Francisco, I came back to Mira Vista Elementary School. In fact, I came back to the very classroom where Mrs. DeMertz had taught me. I was a student teacher then. I had a teacher that, in retrospect, actually looked very much like Mrs. DeMertz, just a slightly younger version. I remember thinking about her and thinking about all the lessons that she had taught me, or lessons that I'd learned from her through my mom and dad's words. I was in the middle one day of a lesson that I had to teach. When you're a student teacher, you have to take over the class as a part of your learning. And I remember doing that. A young man named Joe, in the middle of my lesson, boys and girls, a young man named Joe got up and walked out and left the classroom and slammed the door. I couldn't believe it. I was stunned. Was I a failure? Was I actually destined to be a teacher? I couldn't believe that Joe had done that. I didn't understand it. To make it even worse, my supervisor was there taking notes, looking at how I was teaching and determining what my grade was going to be in my student teaching class. I remember the master teacher leaving the classroom. I remember her coming back, but she didn't come back with Joe. And I was in high anxiety. Later that day, after I had finished all the duties of the day, I received a call from Joe's mother. And Joe's mother told me that Joe had come home and been very disgusted and that she wanted to meet with me right after school. My heartbeat could be felt throughout the entire school. What did Joe's mother want with me? What had I done so wrong to Joe? About an hour later, Joe's mom and he show up in the classroom. Again, I'm in the very same classroom where I learned from Mrs. Demertz. Joe's mom says, "I heard about you." I thought. "Yeah, I heard that you think that you're better than everybody at this school and that you never call on Joe." I took a deep breath. And I thought about Mrs. Demertz. In fact, it was almost like she was sitting there with her Estee Lauder perfume. I thought, what would Mrs. Demertz do? So I looked at Joe and I said, "You know, before I ever took this class, I met with the master teacher, and I asked the master teacher about each and every one of you. I found out, Joe, that you're a skilled musician and that one day you want to be a conductor." And I was thrilled, and I couldn't wait to be your teacher. I truly, truly apologize, Joe, if you felt that I was not asking you any questions. I apologize from the bottom of my heart. Joe's mother stared at me. She couldn't believe it. She thought I was going to get all upset about what she had said about me. She thought that I was going to get angry about what Joe had come home and told her. I began to ask his mother questions about the family, questions about their friends and their hobbies. I remember learning a lesson then that I don't think my mom and dad had taught me yet. Let your curiosity be matched with your compassion. I could have gotten all angry. I could have been mean to Joe and his mom based on what they said. But instead, I began to ask them questions like Mrs. Demertz had done me. And I began to learn even more about Joe and his family than I already knew. As educators, we often speak to students about curiosity being at the edge of innovation. You've learned all about the great inventors, whether it's Albert Einstein or George Washington Carver. All of those individuals were incredibly curious, and that curiosity led to some of the wonderful innovation that we have now. But curiosity can also be a great relationship starter and builder. Curiosity leads to understanding, serving as a cure for anxiety, as long as you give everyone an A until they earn an F, as you always give people the benefit of the doubt, and you let your curiosity be matched with compassion. In closing, boys and girls, let me say a couple of things. One, as I think about the lessons I learned in 6th grade, actually they were lessons that my mother and father had taught me. There are so many lines and things that your mom and dad might say that they won't become reality until later when you learn a little bit more about what they actually were trying to say, or you're experiencing something that helps you. There's another thing that curiosity can cure, and that is the person who gets on your last nerve. Does anybody have one of those? It could be the bully in the classroom. It could be your best friend sometimes. Curiosity can cure those things. All you have to do is step back and think about not yourself, but the other person. I actually was a very tiny 6th grader. I wore a 13 baby shoe, super little. And I could have been the subject for many, many bullies. In fact, I was initially. But in 6th grade, I learned how to get close to the bullies and ask them questions that allowed me to build relationships with them. And eventually, I learned that that helps me, even in adulthood, it helps me. I hope that something I've said has stimulated today. I'm so thankful that you all were my audience today. And I ask you to certainly, hopefully, take something that I've said and build relationships and be successful in your own lives. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you. You were a powerful and dynamic audience. Thank you so much.